This video is for them.
I'm voting for somebody that wants jobs, not wealth. I don't want to be a slave anymore. I don't want hair. I want freedom. I want actual freedom.
And, you know, he gained my respect. He didn't say anything hateful against anybody. He didn't say anything prejudiced. You know, I didn't hear any of that. I didn't hear any.
Black families survived slavery. We survived poll taxes and literacy tests. We survived discrimination being woven into the laws of our country. What was hard to survive was Johnson's Great Society, where they decided.
During Jim Crow, could your family have existed? You are in an interracial marriage. Your wife is a white conservative activist. Could your family have existed at all during Jim Crow?
No, it could not.
Let me think my bow tie.
Yes, waiter.
We back in here.
We waiting on resident validation.
MAGA family, I was on TikTok live and a fellow Trump supporter said that all he needed was my vote. I'll never be part of the MAGA family, and that I'm black, I'll never be accepted, but he just got my vote.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
What's good, everybody? RJ here, and this is Coffee and Convos. This is my reading voice. This is a place for conversation, thought, reflection. I'm here to think out loud, ask better questions, and challenge the stories we're told to accept without examination. You're welcome here. So grab a cup, take a breath, and let's have a real conversation. How much is enough before America finally sees it? In early February 2026, President Donald Trump shared a controversial video on his social media platform that included a brief clip depicting former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama as apes. Imagery widely recognizes racist trope with a long history of dehumanizing black people. The video itself was centered around unfounded allegations about the 2020 election, but toward the end of the altered clip appeared with music from The Lion King playing in the background, promoting bipartisan backlash from lawmakers, civil rights groups, and commentators across the political spectrum. Trump initially defended the post, claiming that he had not seen the entirety of the clip and refused to apologize, describing the video as not a mistake, but it was removed by the White House after sustaining criticism from both Democrats and Republicans. Prominent voices, including Republican Senator Tim Scott, called the imagery the most racist thing he had seen from the White House, and members of Congress urged an apology, while civil rights groups described the post as dehumanizing and offensive. And that's crazy to say, the most racist thing, and we're going to get into the continued racism within the administration. But that incident reignited discussion about racism, representation, and the use of inflammatory content by public figures, especially during Black History Month, when Black leaders and communities are actively honored and remembered. The depiction of Black people as animals is not accidental or modern. It is one of the oldest tools of racial dehumanization in Western history. For centuries, racist caricatures portrayed Black men and women as apes, beasts, or subhuman to justify slavery, segregation, violence, and exclusion from citizenship. This imagery was used in the 19th and 20th century propaganda and pseudoscientific writings, minstrel shows, and political cartoons to argue that Black people were intellectually inferior and undeserving of rights. That history is why such imagery carries weight beyond the insult. It is designed to strip away humanity and diminish legitimacy. When those depictions are used against prominent Black figures, they're meant to collapse achievement into mockery. It signals who is still considered an outsider, regardless of accomplishment. So me personally, I have my criticisms with Barack Obama, especially in his 2 terms as president, but at the same time, I recognize who he is as a person in the historical landscape and what his accomplishments mean for the historical narrative. And Barack and Michelle Obama represent the opposite of what that imagery implies. Barack Obama became the first Black president of the United States through public service, academic excellence, and electoral mandate, graduating from Columbia University and Harvard Law School, where he was president of the Law Review. Michelle Obama is a Princeton and Harvard Law graduate, a lawyer, author, and former First Lady whose incentives on education, health, military families reshaped the whole with substance and global influence. Now let's place them with contrast with Donald Trump. With Donald Trump, it underscores the intent behind the insult. Trump has been convicted of felony offenses, found liable in civil fraud cases, accused by multiple women of sexual misconduct, and presided over a record of failed businesses, including multiple bankruptcies tied to casinos and real estate ventures. When someone with that record resorts to dehumanization instead of comparison on merit, it is not satire or critique. It is an attempt to invert reality, and history shows that inversion is always a sign of insecurity and not strength.
You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't need to wait. And when you're a star, they like to do it. You can do anything, whatever you want. Grab them by the pussy.
Grab him by the pussy.
Donald Trump's history of racist behavior toward Barack Obama did not begin with a video. It began with the lie that Obama was not American. For years, Trump was the loudest and most persistent promoter of the birther conspiracy, falsely claiming that Obama was born outside the United States and therefore an illegitimate as president.
We've interviewed the former director of the Hawaii Department of Health, a Republican, one of two state officials who's actually seen the original birth certificate that you're talking about in the Department of Health vault. She says she hasn't been contacted by your people. I mean, isn't that somebody they should talk to if they're there?
Well, I've been told very recently, Anderson, that the birth certificate is missing. I've been told that it's not there and it doesn't exist.
President Barack Obama was born in the United States, period.
This was not a misunderstanding. It was calculated political strategy rooted in racial suspicion, meant to cast doubt on a Black man's right to power and citizenship. The truth is simple and documented. Barack Obama was born in Honolulu, Hawaii in 1961. His birth certificate was released publicly and verified multiple times by the state of Hawaii, including officials from both political parties. Trump continued to push the lie even after the evidence was undeniable, only backing off years later without an apology. The damage was already done. The message had landed. Black excellence was framed as fraud. Legitimacy was treated as negotiable. Trump's racism resonates because it mirrors something America has never fully confronted about itself. It gives voice to thoughts that are usually hidden behind politeness or denial. His administration repeatedly attempted to excuse, minimize, or outright lie on his behalf, treating behavior that would get anyone else fired as acceptable if it was served in power. If any other job, repeated racist remarks, conspiracy peddling, and public degradation of colleagues and citizens would end a career.
We had a meeting, and they say, why is it we only take people from all countries, right? Why can't we have some people from Norway, Sweden, just a few?
Instead, they were as defended as misunderstood or ignored entirely. Trump has openly claimed that the civil rights protections harmed white people, reframing equality as loss and grievances as injustice, a narrative his administration echoed rather than challenged. The hypocrisy is impossible to miss. Republicans once expressed outrage when President Obama wore a tan suit, questioning decorum and dignity. Yet many of those same voices fell silent when Trump shared imagery depicting Obamas as apes. The contrast reveals more than bipartisanship. It exposes hierarchy of offense, where respectability is demanded from black leaders and indulgence is extended to white power. When institutions bend this far to protect one man, it sends a clear message about how little regard it is held for citizens expected to accept it. That same instinct showed itself decades earlier in Trump's response to the Central Park Five. In 1989, after 5 black and Latino teenagers were wrongfully accused of graping a jogger in New York City, Trump took out a full-page ad calling for the death penalty, declaring that the city has lost its moral compass and that the accused should be punished severely. The boys were later fully exonerated, with DNA evidence and a confession proved they did not commit the crime. Yet, Trump never apologized. Even after their innocence was established, he continued to insist they were guilty, dismissing the evidence and the harm done to their lives. That refusal matters. It shows a pattern. When confronted with truth, Trump does not correct himself. He doubles down. When power is challenged by facts, he chooses a narrative over reality. And history shows that this choice always comes at the expense of those without power to defend themselves. Trump's refusal to apologize or concede error did not emerge in a vacuum. It reflects philosophy he learned early in his career from Roy Cohn, the lawyer who mentored him in the 1970s and 1980s. Cohn was infamous as chief counsel to Senator Joseph McCarthy during the Red Scare, McCarthyism, where he helped weaponize accusations, smear, and fear without evidence, destroying reputations through insinuations rather than proof. His rules were simple and ruthless. Never admit fault. Does January 6th sound familiar? Always counterattack. Claim victory even when you lose. Trump has publicly acknowledged Cohn as a mentor, praising his toughness and approach to power. That training explains the pattern. From the birther lie to Central Park 5, Trump does not retreat from confronting the truth because his model of power treats apology as weakness and accountability as surrender. Cohn taught him that dominance is maintained not by being right, but by never backing down. When viewed through that lens, Trump's behavior is not impulsive. It is inherited strategy. Donald Trump represents a bygone era of white masculinity that many Americans were taught to admire. Loud certainty, defiance mistaken for strength, dominance framed as leadership. His persona mirrors the old John Wayne archetype, the lone man who bends the world through force and moral absolutism. The image still resonates with voters who feel displaced by cultural change and for a long past where power was unquestioned and authority went unchallenged. But that myth collapses under scrutiny. John Wayne himself was not simply a fictional cowboy. In a 1971 interview, he openly expressed racist views, defending white supremacy and opposing civil rights advances, arguing that Black Americans were not ready for equality. Trump channels the same nostalgia, not for law and order, but for hierarchy. His appeal is rooted less in policy than in performance. A return to an era where whiteness, masculinity, and dominance were treated as virtues rather than questioned. That is why his supporters forgive and what disqualifies others. They're not voting for governance. They're voting for a symbol of power they fear is slipping away. Trump's administration did not limit its reach to rhetoric. It moved deliberately into institutions that shape memory and education. In 2025, books centered on Black history, race, and civil rights were removed from the U.S. Naval Academy Library as part of a broader purge tied to dismantling DEI initiatives. While some of those removals were later reversed, the tactic mattered more than the reversal. It signaled an attempt to reshape ideology by restricting access to history itself. This is not about neutrality. It's about narrowing which stories are allowed to inform future leaders. The same impulse showed in the quiet removal of references to slavery and Black resistance from federal exhibits and educational materials, reframing American history to be palatable rather than more honest. That pattern extended into public symbols and civic recognition. Free entry to national parks on Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Juneteenth were eliminated under the Trump-era policy changes, turning days of collective remembrance into ordinary dates stripped of acknowledgement. Black figures or cultural references were removed from White House displays, and official materials under the banner of opposing DEI recast as ideological excesses rather than historical fact. These moves were often defended as administrative or budgetary decisions, but taken together they form something else: a quiet rollback of recognition, a narrowing of those who belong in the national story. When a government begins to decide which histories are worthy of preservation and which are inconvenient, it is no longer governing, it's curating a certain memory. It is also worth noting that the shift in how Trump has engaged Black voters over time. During his first run against Biden, he promoted what he called the Platinum Plan for Black America, a proposal framed under investment, opportunity zones, and economic access. Whether one believed it or not, it was at least acknowledgement for Black Americans as a constituency worth addressing directly. In the second run, the posture largely disappeared. There was no comparable platform, no sustained outreach, no articulated vision aimed at Black communities beyond spectacle and symbolism. What replaced it was grievance politics and cultural provocation. The absence speaks volumes. It suggests that Black voters were not seen as partners to persuade, but as backdrop to be used, dismissed, or antagonized once political utility faded. When engagement becomes transactional and conditional, it reveals how shallow the commitment was to begin with. Not only Trump is racist, but racism is not the only indictment of his record. His name continues to appear in publicly released Epstein-related materials, including flight logs and prior testimonies. While significant portions of investigative records remain sealed or redacted, limiting full public transparency. At the same time, measurable indicators during his most recent term have raised serious concerns. The national debt continues to climb, surpassing $34 trillion. A deficit widening amid expanded federal spending and tax policy shifts. Border encounters reach a record high in the prior fiscal years, straining that federal resources and state infrastructure despite repeated campaigns to promise immediate resolution. Violent crime tends to have fluctuated regionally, contradicting claims of uniform collapse or immediate restitution of order. Inflation, while cooling from its 2022 peak, has continued to impact housing, insurance, and food costs, while leaving working families facing sustained affordability pressure. Despite pledges to swiftly end foreign conflicts, the U.S. military and diplomatic tensions remain active in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East, with continued funding commitments and strategic deployments. What remains is a pattern of spectacle without structural resolution and grievance without sustained governance. When rhetoric outpaces measurable outcomes and scrutiny is framed as precision, accountability becomes conditional and the public absorbs the consequences. Trump is clearly trying to pivot on race by circulating old photos of himself with Black celebrities and leaders and publicly commemorating Reverend Jesse Jackson, framing himself as an ally. But It comes right after the backlash over racially charged controversies, which makes the timing feel strategic, not sincere. Posting pictures and tributes is easy. Addressing policies, rhetoric, and patterns that created distrust in the first place is the real test, and that part still feels missing. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. At that point, there are only three explanations left. Either a mistake was made, there's ignorance in some form, or there's a decision not to care. None of those are harmless. You should care about your nation, about your neighbor, about the shared well-being that makes society worth living in. Indifference is not neutrality, it is permission. Power depends on people looking away long enough for the damage to become normal. The question is not whether other signs are clear. The question is, how long will it take before we admit that the water is wet?
Crime wave in Gotham. Other breaking news. Water wet.
Now, thank you for taking this time to have this conversation with me. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Looking forward to hearing from you. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe.